Your destiny is reflecting in the chrome surfaces of the future, waiting for you to step forward and claim it. Join us for the stories of those who dare to take control and rewrite their own history. Click subscribe now and start building your own cinematic legacy today.
My name is Teresa Ann Whitmore. I'm 29 years old. On November 22nd, 2023, my mother called me home for Thanksgiving. Real family time, she said. Just all of us together. Her voice was softer than usual, almost careful, the way you talk to someone you've been ignoring and suddenly need. I drove 87 miles from my apartment in Nashville down to Clarkfield, Tennessee, past the cotton fields and the water tower with the old Cardinals logo painted on it, and the feed store that had been there since before I was born. The drive took an hour and 40 minutes. I remember the exact time I turned onto County Road 9, 10:47 a.m. I remember it because I looked at the clock and thought, they're waiting. They weren't. My grandmother's farmhouse sat at the end of a gravel driveway, 300 feet of loose rock my grandfather had laid himself in 1958. 65 years of tire tracks had worn 2 pale lines into it. When I pulled up, I counted the vehicles. 1. My grandmother's 2001 Ford pickup, white, faded to the color of old teeth at the edges. No rental cars, no sign of my parents' Cadillac, no sign of my brother Spencer's leased BMW. I sat in my car for a moment. The engine ticked as it cooled. Then I saw her, through the front window, my grandmother, 81 years old, sitting in the wooden rocker she'd had since my mother was a girl. She wasn't watching TV, she wasn't reading, she was watching the road, she was watching for me. I went inside. The kitchen smelled like coffee and pine cleaner and something older underneath. That particular scent of a house that has held 80 years of living inside its walls. On the kitchen table, pinned under the sugar bowl, was a note, my mother's handwriting. I recognized it, the way you recognize something you've been dreading. Teresa, Spencer surprised us with a long weekend in Napa. His firm rented a vineyard house. Apparently a very important client is involved. You know how much these things matter for his career. We'll be back Sunday. Grandma Ruth's medications are on the counter, 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. You're a teacher, you're used to keeping schedules. Don't forget, Mom. No apology. No, we're so sorry. No mention that they'd asked me to drive 2 hours for a family Thanksgiving. Just, Spencer surprised us. You're a teacher, don't forget. I read it 3 times. My grandmother's voice came from the living room. Is there still coffee in the pot? There was. I poured 2 cups and carried them in and sat down across from her. She watched me the way she always watched people. Quietly, with those gray eyes that seemed to catch everything without appearing to try. They left this morning, she said, not a question. I know. Your mother called me from the airport. She paused. She asked if I had enough food. Do you? I have a freezer full of venison and 6 dozen eggs. I've survived worse things than a long weekend alone. She set her cup down. But I'm glad you're here. I didn't cry. I'd used most of my crying on things like this back in my mid-20s. What I felt instead was something quieter, a familiar settling, like a bone that breaks in the same place enough times that it stops hurting the way it used to. Let me take you back, because this wasn't just one Thanksgiving. It was the latest entry in a very long record, and some of those entries need to be told. June 3rd, 2019. My college graduation from Western Kentucky University. I had a 3.89 GPA. I'd worked 2 part-time jobs for most of my 4 years, tutoring on weekday afternoons and weekend shifts at a coffee shop on campus. My cap had a gold honor cord. I'd sent my parents the ceremony date in January, followed up in March, texted the week before. The morning of graduation, my phone lit up at 8:12 a.m. My mother, honey. Spencer has his Series 7 exam retake today in Louisville. It was rescheduled last minute. You understand, this is critical for his career. So proud of you. We'll take you to dinner next week. Spencer was 26. He had already failed the exam once. My grandmother drove 40 minutes alone from Clarkfield to see me graduate. She wore the blue dress she saved for church. She'd had the flower shop on Main Street put together a small bouquet, daisies and yellow roses, and she'd forgotten to pull the price tag off. She sat in the third row on the right side, and when I walked across that stage, I could hear her clapping over everyone else. We had lunch at the Cracker Barrel afterward, just the two of us. She ordered the chicken and dumplings and told me I was going to make a fine teacher. Not, I'm sure you'll be fine. She said it like a fact she'd already verified. September 14th, 2021. I was 27, in my second year at Hillcrest Elementary. One of my students, a quiet boy who came to school every day in the same 2 shirts on rotation, was placed in emergency foster care after I filed a welfare report. I'd spent 3 days documenting what I'd observed, writing up the paperwork, coordinating with the school, counselor, and the Department of Children's Services. When they moved him to a safe placement, his caseworker called me personally to say I'd likely kept something much worse from happening. That same week, Spencer closed a deal that earned him a commission north of $40,000. My parents threw him a dinner at the nicest steakhouse in Nashville. I wasn't invited. I found out through Instagram. My mother posted a photo. Spencer in a suit, champagne flutes, the whole thing captioned, "So proud of our boy. Hard work pays off." I called my grandmother that night. She listened to everything. When I finished, she said, "I see you, Teresa. I want you to know that." I thought she was being kind. I didn't understand yet what she meant. Here's what I didn't know then. My grandmother had been keeping a record for a very long time. Every missed graduation, every dinner I wasn't invited to, every Christmas where my parents spent $2,000 on Spencer's gift and $200 on mine. A gap I'd stopped tracking after the 3rd time, because keeping track of it felt like participating in it. She saw it. She remembered it. She was documenting it in that steady, unhurried way of hers, the way she'd kept records of everything her whole life. In her head, precise, without drama. I didn't know what she intended to do about it. Back to that farmhouse kitchen, November 22nd, 2023. I stayed. Of course I stayed. My apartment in Nashville felt wrong somehow, and my grandmother needed her blood pressure medication managed. Her prescriptions picked up on Friday, someone to drive her when the roads got icy. I was a teacher. I was used to being needed in ways that didn't come with much acknowledgement. The first morning, I found her at the kitchen table at 6:45 a.m. with a cup of coffee already made, and the newspaper already folded open to the crossword. She was that kind of person, sharp and awake before the world had a chance to catch up with her. "Tell me about your students this year," she said. So I told her. I told her about the girl who'd read at a 3rd grade level in August and was now working through chapter books on her own. I told her about the boy with the speech impediment who'd spent the first 6 weeks of school with his hand down because the other kids would snicker, and how I'd spent 2 months building something different in that classroom until the snickering stopped and his hand came back up. My grandmother listened with her whole body, leaning forward, asking questions. "You love that work," she said. "I do. Does your mother know that?" I thought about it for a moment. She knows I teach 4th grade. My grandmother nodded slowly. Those are different things. On the 3rd day, she asked me to drive her to First National Bank on Main Street. I waited in the lobby while she went to the vault with a teller who seemed to know her well. She was back in 22 minutes, carrying a brown accordion folder with a rubber band closure. She held it under her arm like it was nothing particularly important. In the car, she said, "Do you know how much this land is worth?" I glanced over at her. We were passing the back field, 83 acres, fallow in November, the soil dark and cold. I've never thought about it. Your grandfather bought it in 1961 for $11,000. She looked out the window. I sold the development rights to a conservation trust in 2018, and I sold 12 acres on the east side to a solar company in 2020. She paused. Between that and some investments your grandfather started before he passed, investments I've kept running since, I have a little money set aside. That's good, Grandma. A little over $16 million, she said, in the same tone she'd used to mention the price of chicken at the Kroger. I nearly ran a stop sign. You? What? Your father thinks I have about $40,000 in a savings account and a paid-off house. She looked at me calmly. I let him think that. My hand stayed steady on the wheel, but my heart was doing something complicated. Why? She was quiet for a long moment. The bare fields slid by outside. Because I wanted to know who people were when they thought I had nothing. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in the guest room under the blue quilt that had been there since I was 8 and stared at the ceiling and thought about what she'd said. $16 million. My grandmother, who clipped coupons and drove a 22-year-old pickup truck and had shown up alone to my college graduation with a $12 bouquet and the price tag still on. On the 6th day, the kitchen landline rang. She still had one, a black rotary phone mounted to the wall. She answered it. Ruth Whitmore speaking. A pause. Yes, Philip, I received it. Another pause. Not yet, but I've seen what I needed to see. Pause. Monday, 2 o'clock. Come to the house. Bring everything. She hung up and walked back to the living room and picked up her crossword puzzle. Philip, Monday. Bring everything. I kept my eyes on the papers I'd been grading. I didn't ask. Some part of me, the same part that had folded my mother's note and put it in my coat pocket and kept it there every day since, understood I was supposed to wait. My boyfriend Daniel called that evening. We'd been together for 3 years. He was a firefighter out of Station 7 on Charlotte Avenue, the kind of man who showed up with flowers on random Tuesdays because he'd seen some at the grocery store and thought of me. He knew everything about my family. I'd told him all of it, over many late nights in his kitchen, both of us sitting on the counter, because his table was permanently covered in things he was fixing. How are you holding up? He asked. Better than I expected, I said. I looked across the room at my grandmother reading by the lamp. She's good company. Your mom texted me, he said carefully, asked if I knew why you weren't returning her calls. I had 22 unread messages from my mother at that point. I'd read them all. I hadn't responded to any of them. I'll call her when I'm ready, I said. My grandmother looked up briefly, met my eyes, and looked back at her book. Monday arrived. Philip Vance appeared at 2:02 p.m. He was in his 60s, compact, with a gray beard and a navy suit that had been carefully pressed. He carried a leather briefcase and shook my hand when my grandmother introduced us and said, Mrs. Whitmore, I've heard a great deal about you over the years. We sat at the dining room table, the one that came out for important occasions only. Thanksgiving dinners, tax paperwork, serious conversations. He opened his briefcase and slid documents across the table. I saw my name, Teresa Ann Whitmore, over and over in the formal language that turns people into roles: beneficiary, trustee, executor. He walked through it the way a professional walks through difficult information. Clearly, without theatrics, giving every number time to land. Total estate value, $16 million. To my father, $175,000. To my mother, $175,000. To my brother Spencer, $175,000. To the Clarkfield Literacy Council, Tennessee Children's Home Society, and a classroom supply fund for Title I schools in 3 counties, $2.8 million in charitable trust. To Teresa Ann Whitmore, $13.75 million, plus sole discretionary authority over any future distributions to family members, at her direction, at any time for any reason she chose. I couldn't speak. Grandmother put her hand over mine. Her fingers were thin, the knuckles swollen with arthritis she never mentioned. Her grip was steady. "They treated you like you were the least of them," she said quietly. "I want you to know you were always the most." Philip produced a sealed envelope, cream paper, heavy stock, my grandmother's handwriting on the front, to be read aloud when the family is present. "Your family returns Sunday?" he asked me. I nodded. "I'll be here at 3 o'clock." He notarized the documents. My hand shook badly when I signed. The notary seal went down at 2:51 p.m. Legal, witnessed, irrevocable. That evening, we made venison soup from what she had in the freezer, the slow kind with root vegetables and bay leaves that takes 4 hours and makes the whole house smell like something permanent and good. We ate at the kitchen table, just the two of us. The house was quiet around us in the particular way of a farm in late November. No insects, no leaves moving, just wind finding the gaps in old window frames. "You could give them more," she said, "down the road if you decide they've earned it. That's the whole point." "You're leaving it to me." "I'm leaving you the power to decide, because you'll use your heart and your good sense both at the same time." She looked at her bowl. "I've watched your father use only his pride for 30 years. It's made him smaller. I didn't want that for you." Sunday arrived gray and cold. My parents' Cadillac pulled into the driveway at 2:49 p.m., Spencer's BMW right behind it. I heard them before I could see them. Car doors. The sound of luggage on gravel. My mother's voice saying something about the flight being delayed. Her tone still carrying that loosened ease of people who've spent a weekend being very well taken care of. Philip Vance was already in the living room, briefcase on the coffee table, hands folded. My grandmother was in her chair. I was on the sofa. They came through the door, carrying wine bottles from Napa in gift bags, one for my parents, one for Spencer and his girlfriend, tanned and rested, and not yet reading the room. My mother stopped when she saw Philip. "Mom?" My father's voice shifted registers immediately. "Who is this?" My grandmother said, "Sit down, please." My brother looked at me across the room. I looked back at him with nothing particular on my face. They sat. Spencer on the love seat, my parents on the couch, my mother with one of the wine bags still in her lap, not sure what to do with it. She set it down carefully on the floor. Philip introduced himself. My father's jaw went tight the moment the words estate planning entered the air. "Ruth," my father said, "if this is about updating some paperwork, we could have discussed it as a family. You didn't need to involve an attorney without." "Yes, I did," she said, "because you would have talked me out of it." Silence. Philip opened the briefcase. He explained the structure the same way he'd explained it to me, methodical, without theater, giving each number enough space to be understood. My mother made a small sound when Philip said the total, not a word, just a sound. When he read Spencer's allocation, $175,000, my brother's face went completely still. He was a financial advisor. He did the arithmetic in about 3 seconds. My father stood up. "Mother, this is not what you actually want. You've been here alone with Teresa for 10 days and—" "Sit down, Gerald." Her voice was quiet. It didn't need to be anything else. He sat. Philip reached into the folder and produced the letter. He opened the envelope carefully, unfolded 3 pages in my grandmother's handwriting, and he read, "To my son Gerald, my daughter-in-law Patricia, and my grandson Spencer. I am 81 years old. I have paid close attention for a long time. What I have paid attention to in this family over the past 30 years is one child being treated as a destination and one child being treated as a detour. June 3, 2019. Teresa's graduation. You drove to Louisville for Spencer's exam retake. I drove 40 minutes alone and watched your daughter cross that stage. She had a gold honor cord on her cap. She had worked 2 jobs to earn that degree. You sent her a text message and a grocery store gift card. September 2021. Teresa filed a child welfare report that may have saved one of her students from serious harm. That same week, you held a celebratory dinner for Spencer's commission bonus. Teresa found out from a photograph on social media. You did not think to tell her or to invite her or to call. November 22nd, 2023. You told Teresa to come home for Thanksgiving. You left her a note and flew to California. My mother's mascara was tracking down both cheeks in slow lines. Philip's voice didn't change. I have $16 million. I have lived on less than $30,000 a year since your father died. I drive a truck that is 22 years old. I clip coupons from the Sunday paper. I have done this because I wanted to see who my family was when they thought I had nothing left to give them. I know the answer now. Teresa stayed with me, not because she expected anything. She arrived to an empty house, found a note telling her to be useful, and she stayed anyway. She managed my medications with the same care I imagine she gives her students. She drove me where I needed to go. She sat with me at the kitchen table every night and asked me about my life. Not my estate, not my health as a logistical concern. My life. She asked how I met your grandfather. She asked what I was like at her age. She listened like the answers mattered. That is why she receives everything. Gerald, Patricia, Spencer, you will each receive $175,000. If you want more, you will need to ask Teresa. And before you ask her for money, I suggest you ask her for something else. Whether she is willing to forgive you, not to split a number, whether she is willing to forgive you. Those are different conversations, and only one of them means anything. I love you. Loving you does not mean I will reward you for treating my granddaughter as less than she is. It means I won't. Ruth Eleanor Whitmore, November 27, 2023. Philip set the letter down. The room held its breath for what felt like a very long time. Spencer spoke first, his voice quiet. You're a school teacher. I looked at him. Yes. You make, what, $50,000 a year? 48. He shook his head slowly. My mother turned to me. Her eyes were red, mascara gone. Teresa, honey, whatever you think happened, we always loved you the same as Spencer. You have to know that. Something steady moved through me. You don't know what flowers I like, I said. You've sent me the same grocery store carnations every birthday for 6 years. I'm allergic to carnations, Mom. I've mentioned it twice. I kept my voice level, not loud, just clear. You know Spencer takes his coffee with oat milk and no sugar. I've heard you order it for him without even asking. You have never once asked how I take mine. She didn't answer. My father crossed the room, crouched down in front of my grandmother's chair, a gesture that might have meant something in a different context. Mom, you've known me 54 years. I'm your son. Whatever Teresa has. She hasn't told me anything I hadn't already observed myself, my grandmother said. Stand up, Gerald. He stood. Spencer walked out without another word, got into his BMW, and sat in the driveway for 9 minutes before driving away. I counted. My father stopped in the doorway. Family is the only thing that lasts, Teresa. You'll understand that someday. Then you should have acted like it, I said. He left. My mother lingered. She picked up both wine bags from the floor, held them for a moment, and then set them back down on the coffee table. I'm your mother, she said. I deserve better than this. I thought about the 22 texts. I thought about, can you make sure Grandma has eaten as the first message she sent after landing? Not I'm sorry, not how are you? Just a task, delegated. When you're ready to have a different kind of conversation, I said, I'll be here. She left. Ah! Philip Vance closed his briefcase and shook my hand at the door. Account access documentation will come to you within 48 hours. My office will guide you through every step. He paused with his hand on the doorknob. She's talked about you for years. I want you to know that. I closed the door and stood in the hallway for a moment. From the living room, my grandmother said, "There's still soup on the stove." We ate together, just the two of us, the way we'd eaten every night for 10 days. The messages started at 6:47 p.m., Spencer first, then my father, then my mother. By the end of the week, I had counted 41 texts, 9 phone calls, and 2 emails, one of which arrived on my brother's firm letterhead, using words like undue influence and Oregon revised statutes, despite the fact that we were in Tennessee, which Philip Vance called a reasonably impressive error for a financial advisor. He advised me to forward everything and respond to nothing. I forwarded everything. I responded to nothing. Except one. My mother left a voicemail on day 4. I listened to it once all the way through. She cried through most of it. She said she loved me. She said she didn't understand what she'd done wrong. She didn't say she was sorry. Not in those exact words, but the sound of her voice was different. Less like a position, more like a person. I saved the voicemail. I didn't call back, not yet. I called Philip and laid out my conditions. If my family wanted me to consider additional distributions beyond what my grandmother had already designated, 3 things needed to happen. First, 6 months of individual counseling with a licensed therapist, attendance verified and sent to me in writing. Second, 20 volunteer hours at a Title I school. A real classroom, real kids, no press, no documentation for their own benefit. Third, a handwritten letter, no attorneys, telling me specifically and honestly what they saw when they looked at how they had treated me over the years. Not what they wished they'd done differently. What they actually saw. Philip was quiet for a moment on the line. That's more than fair, Teresa. I'd say it's generous. Certified letters went out the following week. My father enrolled in counseling in January. Confirmation came in the form of a brief email from the therapist's office, just attendance, nothing about content. My mother followed 2 weeks after that. By February, I had verifications for both of them. In March, my father called me, no lawyer, no email, and said, "I've been thinking about that graduation, June 2019. He didn't finish the sentence, but he called. We talked for 11 minutes. It wasn't everything, it was something. Spencer never responded. He sent one email through his firm's attorney proposing a redistribution of the estate along lines he described as reflecting our grandmother's true intent of family unity. Philip's response was 4 words: "This will not proceed." It didn't proceed. I donated $1.8 million to the Clarkfield Literacy Council, the Tennessee Children's Home Society, and a classroom supply fund covering Title I schools across 3 counties, all of it in my grandmother's name. She was alive to see the letters of acknowledgement arrive. She read each one at the kitchen table on a Tuesday afternoon with her coffee, and when she finished, she folded them neatly and said, "Good. That's good." I still teach. I go in on Monday mornings and 22 kids look up from their desks, and I think the same thing I thought before any of this happened. This is the work I chose. This is where I'm supposed to be. I own my apartment now instead of renting it. Daniel proposed on April 6th on a trail at Percy Warner Park we'd walked a dozen times before, in the early evening when the light came through the bare trees at that particular angle that makes everything look like it was placed there on purpose. I said yes. Before he finished the sentence, my grandmother came to the dinner we had afterward. She wore the blue dress. The money didn't make me who I am, it just made it impossible for anyone to convince me I was less. My name is Teresa Ann Whitmore. I am a 4th grade teacher in Nashville, Tennessee. And for the first time in 29 years, not one person in the world can make me feel like that isn't exactly enough.